The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Canada is broken, says Rob Driscoll of Big Media. And on a weekly basis, his media outlet publishes one article after another that showcases where Canada is, in fact, broken. In a recent article, Driscoll asks readers to rank how we as a country are doing, from perfectly healthy to Humpty Dumpty is smashed into so many pieces reassembly is impossible. The facts suggest we're in trouble, Driscoll says. We have the worst housing affordability in the developed world, declining GDP, declining productivity, a weakening dollar, ethical violations and scandals, healthcare in decline, to name some of the more than 20 indicators. The source of our malaise is government policy, says Driscoll. He says, in addition to our national challenges, our international reputation is sliding, and the source of that decline is also a mix of government policies. I invited Rob Driscoll, the co-founder of Big Media, to join me for a conversation that matters about how we got here, and is there possibly a way out? Is Humpty Dumpty not smashed beyond repair? Rob, welcome.
Good day, Stuart.
Do you worry on an hourly basis, a daily basis, a weekly basis about the direction that the country is moving in?
Well, I've been worried quite a lot for the last 9 years, actually, and I think it boils down to just a leadership that lacks leadership skills and has been more interested in photo opportunities and virtue signaling than actually leading with integrity. And so a lot of what you mentioned in the outset came from an article that was written by Grant Wild. And Grant Wild is an incredible business leader, just stepped down as president of Spartan Controls. And this guy knows what he's talking about. And he just laid out all those facts for us. And some critics question how I could say Canada's broken, but all of these things are facts. They're not just something that is a biased view trying to take down the government. No, we are in trouble, and it is simply a result of terrible management.
Is it just that simple, that it's terrible management, or is that exacerbated by an expanding public service that is in many ways disconnected with the realities of living in a complicated world?
Yeah, and that's part of the public policy was that they were growing the government. It's just a giant beast of overhead now, and instead of putting money where it really mattered. And I can talk about all kinds of other things where the government wrote checks for everybody who put their hand up and said they're a victim. Here, have a couple $1 billion, and Ukraine have a lot more. And all of these things, and maybe the most egregious one was hundreds of billions of dollars spent to keep healthy Canadians home during the pandemic. And what happened, there were all kinds of terrible consequences to that policy. But imagine if we spent a couple $100 billion on improving affordable housing. That we haven't put that kind of effort toward it, but we did. We just gave a bunch of people money to stay home. And anyway, it's just been bad decision after bad decision after scandal after scandal.
Your sense of the response to COVID-19 was overreach?
Incredible overreach. And I was shouting from the rooftops, and a lot of people will say, oh, well, yeah, hindsight is 2020. And I say, yeah, in 2020, it was very clear that the virus was a risk for severe outcomes to a very small subset of the population, people who are very unhealthy, vulnerable, multiple comorbidities. Those people needed to be protected. Healthy people needed to keep living. And when we shut down our society and closed businesses, and one of the headlines in an article I wrote before the lockdown was saving businesses saves lives. Just trying to point out that that it's not just fighting a virus, it's keeping people from committing suicide, from accidental drug overdoses, from having stress-related heart attack. I knew that bad things were going to happen, and unfortunately I was right. And when you look at Laurie Weston, just an absolute brilliant scientist who is my co-founder with Big Media, and she did just absolutely the best analysis of excess deaths, and it showed that during the pandemic, most of the excess deaths were age 20 to 59, and not from COVID, from all these stress-related things and heart-related disease and all these things that were arguably a direct result of government policy. Now, Canada wasn't alone in that, and it was a very difficult time to be a politician, but we blew it, and a lot of young lives were lost as a result.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Let's take a look at fiscal policy under the current government at the moment. We are seeing record deficits leading to record debt, which is driving up the cost of government and robbing the very programs that we say we want of the funds that they require. How important is it that we start to have a more responsible fiscal policy?
It's critical that it happens very soon, and obviously a lot of people are hoping for change at the polls in 2025 or earlier. If that doesn't happen, hopefully the people leading the country, whoever it is, actually understand by now the terrible mistakes that have been made and correct course and not chase our best leaders away. I'm just going to quickly mention a story. I recently, in the hockey playoffs, was sitting down at a bar and just happened to be sitting beside a guy who did amazing things in the entertainment industry, musical producer. And he was talking about how he is now working with a tax accountant, tax expert, trying to understand what the best way is for him to get his money out of Canada, because our most successful people now feel like there's a bullseye on their head and they're trying to get the money out instead of what he was planning to do, which was retire in Vancouver and spend all that money helping kids afford, helping drive the economy and actually provide more jobs. Now we're losing a lot of our best because the virtue signaling policies and going after the wealthy, that has a trickle down effect that means that there's less money for our kids, and this is why I get pretty upset about it. I have 7 children, as I mentioned before we went on air, and it matters to me a lot when I see our government pushing our country in a disastrous direction.
Recent numbers out suggest that there's more than 120,000 Canadians that are leaving the country this year. 120,000. And as Ernest Lang refers to these people, he calls them members of the productivity class. Mm-hmm. These are people who actually do things. They're the people who we want to have working and building their lives here and their careers because they make money and they pay taxes. But it's as though right now they are feeling that they can't get ahead.
Yeah, and this is the short-sighted PR campaign that unfortunately the Liberal government and NDP have sort of hung their hats on, and that is to appeal to the I'll say less educated, persuadable people and tell them that we're trying to look after you and we're going to go after those greedy, rich corporate guys. But those corporate guys in Canada are generally top-notch people. The business leaders I know, the wealthy people, are actually the kind of guys who are donating huge amounts of money to hospitals and food banks. And the reason we have this beautiful healthcare system in Canada, which by the way is going down, it's still in good shape, but if we keep doing what we're doing in terms of our economy, then we'll lose that as well, because you need leaders to run a good economy so that the funds are there to drive this beautiful healthcare system. And for the last 9 years, we've had a government that just doesn't talk about the real issues. It just preys on the most persuadable people, tells you the world is burning, tells you COVID is the worst plague to ever see, and tries to manipulate people into voting for them through fear. And that is not strong leadership. That is just awful, empty virtue signaling.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. You touched on the topic of the economy because the economy is what drives everything. And if we take a look at what has traditionally been the driver of Canadian economy, it's our relationship with natural resources. Because the great thing about natural resources is that they're in abundance. We sell them outside of our own country, which means that brings in foreign capital, which allows us to grow our economy. Over the last 8 or 9 years, we seem to be turning our back on the very backbone of the Canadian economy, to the point now where Canada is seeing a shortage of interest in investment in major projects. How concerning is this?
All of these things are a huge concern to me, and it's the money goes where people think they'll make more money, right? And so foreign investment is slowing down. Our own production is going down, and we have an environmental movement that is attacking the ethically run Canadian companies, and basically handing the keys to the Saudis and Russians in terms of who controls the energy world, and so. Thankfully, we have an incredible abundance of natural resources, and we've got great hydro and wind and solar play a role. But attacking the oil and gas sector, and I do think the federal government's kind of backing off on that lately because it's becoming painfully obvious that our oil and gas industry is actually doing amazing things for our country, and must continue to do so for many years and way beyond 2050. And anybody who believes that we can transition away from oil and gas, just unless there's some kind of miraculous advance in cold fusion, it's not going to happen. Especially with AI right now, the demands for power are increasing so aggressively that we're going to need every drip of oil and gas we can produce, plus solar, plus hydro, plus everything else, nuclear, and just to feed the monster that we're creating. And if you read the main story on our homepage at big-media.ca by Laurie Weston, it's a little bit ominous, but it's a story I think we should all read, because there are simple numbers that she points out that will tell you that we're in trouble. We are heading down a road where we're handing over the power to the drivers of the AI movement, and this is something we all need to pay attention to.
Well, AI is another issue, and it's still emerging as a big sector. But as you pointed out, the energy requirements that AI need are enormous. Did a very interesting conversation a while ago with a Dutch economist who did the calculations on what AI requires, which supersede that of Bitcoin, which is a huge energy pig as well. So I don't know if you saw the story the other day that showed that the Trans Mountain Pipeline already is outperforming the British Columbia economy. So when you talk about the resource sector, and this was a much maligned project that the costs were driven up enormously to the point where everybody was predicting it will never pay itself off, but it's already outperforming expectations. That this is because the world, as you pointed out, needs energy.
Absolutely, and the global energy demand was already growing fairly aggressively, with the exception of a year and a half where the lockdowns really brought down the industry. But that was before AI even took hold, and so now we've got it's going to be all hands on deck, and natural gas especially to me it's like a miraculous, quite clean. Not perfectly clean, but very clean fuel that provides amazing power to so many people that we couldn't basically live in Canada if we didn't have natural gas doing its thing.
So we haven't touched on housing yet, which housing policies, there's been 63 announcements over the last year and a bit that were supposedly all designed to addressing housing challenges, and yet you see that developers are stepping away from investing in the kind of development that's needed to meet the housing crisis, and landlords are now starting to say, well, we're not going to enter that market either. It's as though the policies that are being introduced are producing the opposite outcome that was intended or stated.
Yes, and it's a combination of poor vision and just a lack of acumen. I won't go into the resumes of the current Liberal leadership, but that caucus, the whole Liberal Party, you saw what they did was they made a big deal about making sure that there were enough colored people and women in these positions instead of looking at who the best person is for that job.
Let's be clear, you can still have a woman and you can still have a person of color, but it's merit that matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of brilliant women. And I'm going to say my partner I mentioned, Lori Weston, is the smartest person I've ever met. If she was our prime minister, our country would be in amazing shape because she actually has integrity. And she leads with, she walks the talk, and she's intelligent, and that's what we need. And I wish we could just suddenly form a new party out of the people that I work with, because they do care. And obviously, the conservative government, Pierre Poilievre, he's leading the polls, and if he takes over, one thing that people have to understand, like I've never promoted a particular political party, and I won't promote Pierre Poilievre. If he gets voted in, I'll be doing the same thing I'm doing with the Liberals and NDP right now. I'll be holding them accountable if they make terrible decisions, and we'll be talking about it and hoping ultimately to put pressure on the elected officials to come up with policies that actually help our country instead of damage it. So.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So let me ask the question that you posed to your readers. Do you believe that Canada is like so broken, Humpty Dumpty so broken that reassembly is impossible?
Sometimes I get that feeling, and when you walk down the streets or you go through downtown East Side in Vancouver, or you're anywhere near the SkyTrain stations in certain areas, and in Toronto near their rapid transit, there's so much crime. And a colleague of ours, Michael Finley, was recently killed by someone on the street just walking along, and gets attacked, and he's dead now. And that's just one of so many heartbreaking stories. And so there are people being pushed into homelessness every day. There are record numbers going to the food bank, and our country's in big trouble. Do I think it's irreparable? No. It's in bad shape right now, and we're like, all these trends we're talking about are really terrible, and we're bringing in more and more immigrants, like ridiculous numbers of immigrants who are coming here and then realizing, what? This isn't the Canada we were told about, and so it's all in a very precarious situation, and we need to fix these things, and it's not going to be easy.
Well, you bring up something that is quite interesting about sort of immigration policy. There's no doubt that Canada needs to invite people to come here. We have huge gaps in the human resources that are required to fill the job and workload that's there. But the way that the policy has been designed isn't as though it's specific enough, and it's putting people in a position where they arrive here, and as you say, they look around and go, I don't think I'm staying. And I know of a number of examples of well-paid people who are doing well, who said, I'm going back to Europe, I'm going back to the South Pacific, I'm going back to India, because the opportunities aren't here, and the cost of living is so incredibly high.
Yeah, and I have the great fortune of not owning a motor vehicle, so I do my surveys quite regularly in Ubers and taxis, and it's a great way to really see what's going on. And so I talked to a gentleman from India last night, and he's just so sad. And this guy came over with high hopes and lots of education, and now he's a cab driver, and he's barely paying the bills, right? And so there are innumerable numbers of people who are in that shape right now, and the middle class is being squeezed down, and there are a lot of working homeless people now, right? And It's terrible. But back to your question, it's not irreparable. We can fix things, but it's going to take some difficult decisions. You know, I'm going to bring up Ralph Klein as an example, who came into Alberta, and you know, he was just a journalist, but he came into a situation where they had way too much fat in the government and in the medical system, and he made very difficult decisions and was extremely unpopular at the start, but then became the most popular politician maybe ever because his policies were good and they helped turn the province around economically, which is the most important thing.
So do you think that you can sense that there's a swing that's starting to happen, that the general public is now starting to say, okay, my cost of living continues to rise, the quality of my life is deteriorating, I'm watching real per capita GDP decline, and that has a compounding effect on me, not just now, but in the years to come. Do you think that there is now a sense within the country that people are going, okay, we need to pay attention to the essentials that turn Canada into a great country in the first place?
Yes, so I think the pendulum is swinging back on so many different things. And there was a period where life was just too easy in Canada. And so I didn't need to have all these incredibly difficult conversations with my children. And I started big media because I saw that people were being absolutely misled and that our governments were taking us down a very dangerous path. And I wanted to really help spark conversations like we're having today, where we talk about important issues and help educate the kids and everyone into realizing that, wow, we need to make some changes. And so, you know, when I talk to my kids, I'm telling them, look, we need to pay attention to integrity when we vote. Doesn't matter what party you vote for. You can vote locally for the MLA provincially or MP federally that resonates with you. But keep in mind, we need to have change, and that pendulum, I can see it swinging back fairly aggressively. And so I'm actually optimistic, even though the challenges we have are massive. 3 years ago, when we started publishing accurate, fact-based, fully attributed articles about COVID and climate change, I was getting attacked relentlessly. Like the names I was called, and it was nonstop. 3 years later, almost every day, at least one person sends me a note saying, thanks for doing what you're doing. And some of those people were my critics 3 years ago. But when you take the high road and you stick to it, and I wish politicians would learn this in Canada and the US, you know, you might take some lumps at the start, but then you have credibility and you have faith and you have authenticity. Obviously, there's a dearth of authenticity in politics these days, but it can happen. And I believe those politicians who come through and now stick to logical, environmentally responsible, economically feasible policies that will help our country. It might be hard, it will be hard, but I believe they will, within a year or two, just show the people that, okay, this is what we need now. You know, we had our little fun with the fake climate catastrophe and the overblown threat of COVID. We learned that the media and the government, and a lot of times it was the media wagging the tail of the government, and sometimes it's the opposite, but unfortunately, the truth has been missing in action in the mainstream media for a number of years. But now people realize that there's an awakening. I really believe that, an intellectual awakening. Critical thinking is starting to become cool again. And so I am at the end of the day optimistic that we can right the ship.
Well, thanks for coming in and giving us a little bit of a glimpse into what you see as some of the challenges. But I'm also thankful that you're hopeful that we can find our path back to the kind of prosperity and status internationally that we've enjoyed in the past. Thanks for your time today.